This happened about 4 years ago, when I was 20. At the time, I was juggling part-time work and college, and money was tight. I remember feeling proud because I had just managed to rent a tiny, run-down apartment near campus. It wasn't anything special. 1 bedroom, a kitchen, and a bathroom. But it felt like mine. The landlord was an older man, very polite, but quick to stress that the apartment had been vacant for a while. He said the last tenant left suddenly, and he hadn't gotten around to fixing it up much. That didn't matter to me. I was desperate for a place I could afford, and this was cheap enough that I signed the papers on the spot. The first week was uneventful. I spent most of my time unpacking, working shifts, and trying to get comfortable in this new space. But there was one thing I noticed right away. The apartment had no sound. Not in the normal sense. Of course, I could hear the cars outside and the occasional bark of a dog. But inside, in the rooms, it felt like the air swallowed every noise I made. It was unnervingly quiet. It was maybe a week later when the first strange thing happened. I came home late from work, exhausted, and tossed my bag onto the bed. The door slammed shut behind me harder than I intended, and for a second, I thought I heard movement in the other room. Just a faint shuffle, like someone adjusting their weight on a floorboard. I froze. My first thought was that someone had broken in, but the apartment was so small that one glance around the kitchen and bathroom told me there was nowhere for anyone to hide. I shook it off as nerves, but then I noticed something on the floor in the corner of the living room. A single coin, an old, tarnished 10-cent piece. I didn't own any coins like that. I picked it up, stared at it for a while, then left it on the counter. Over the next few days, more objects appeared. A cracked marble, a child's hairpin, a small plastic soldier, each of them placed neatly against the baseboard in the living room, always in the same spot. At first, I thought maybe the landlord had left things behind from the last tenant, but the objects kept showing up. Even after I cleared them away, I'd throw them out, and the next night, there would be something else waiting there. And worse, I started to hear that shuffling noise more often. Always faint, always from the living room, usually when I was in bed. Sometimes I'd hear it drag across the floor slowly, and then stop. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, gripping my sheets, straining my ears for the next sound. One night, after hours of tossing and turning, I decided to just get up and grab some water. I walked into the kitchen, passed through the living room, and stopped dead. Every object I had thrown away over the past 2 weeks was back. The coin, the marble, the hairpin, the toy soldier. But not just those, dozens more. Rusty keys, broken pencils, buttons, old toys, tiny scraps of paper with faded writing. All of them lined up perfectly in rows across the living room floor. I remember my stomach tightening so hard I thought I'd throw up. I didn't want to touch them, didn't want to move. My skin crawled with the awareness that I wasn't alone in that room. I backed away, shut the bedroom door, and locked it. That night, I barely slept at all. The next morning, the living room was spotless. Not a single object in sight. That almost disturbed me more. I tried to tell myself I was stressed, overtired, imagining things. But by then, I couldn't ignore how wrong the place felt. It wasn't just the silence anymore. It was a heavy pressure, like the air itself was thick and watching me. I made up my mind to break the lease and move out. Cheap rent wasn't worth losing my sanity. But before I could leave, I needed answers. I went downstairs and found the landlord. I asked him directly about the last tenant. At first, he brushed it off, said people come and go. But when I pressed, his expression shifted. His smile faltered. Finally, he admitted that the last tenant had been a young single mother with a little boy. She worked nights, and the boy would often be left alone in the apartment. One night, she came home to find him missing. The police searched everywhere. The windows were locked. The door was bolted from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry, no trace of him leaving the building. He had simply vanished. The mother moved out within a week. I remember feeling ice crawl through me as the landlord said the boy was known for collecting little objects, coins, marbles, toys, and lining them up on the floor. That night was my last in the apartment. I lay in bed, wide awake, the landlord's story replaying in my mind. And then I heard it. The soft drag of movement across the living room floor. Louder this time, closer. I sat up, heart hammering, and listened. Then came a sound I'll never forget. A small giggle, high-pitched, childlike. I bolted from bed, grabbed my bag, and ran out without looking back. I moved in with a friend the next day. I never went back for my deposit, never collected the rest of my things. Sometimes I still dream of that room. I see the rows of objects lined up neatly, waiting for me. And in those dreams, just before I wake, I hear the sound of small bare feet padding closer and closer to my bed. This happened to me about 3 years ago when I was 19. I had just started university and was renting a small apartment off campus. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom in a quiet, older building. But it was cheap, and being on my own for the first time felt freeing. Most nights were the same. I'd get back from class, cook something quick, and just relax with my laptop before bed. Nothing about that week felt unusual. The night it started, I had been up late cramming for an exam. It was almost 1 a.m. when I finally shut my books and crawled into bed. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I noticed something odd. The usual hum of traffic outside was gone. Normally, I could at least hear a car pass every now and then, or people walking back from the bars. That night, it was dead silent. I remember thinking it was strange, but eventually, I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly, like something had pulled me out of sleep. At first, I thought maybe it was a noise from the hallway, but when I listened, there was nothing. The silence felt heavier than before, almost like the air itself was pressing down. That's when I realized my bedroom door was open. I always closed it. I was paranoid about that. But now it was cracked halfway, and I could see the faint light from the kitchen bleeding through. I told myself I must have forgotten, got up and shut it. The next night, it happened again. I woke up and the door was open. This time, I was certain I had shut it before bed. I even remembered hearing the latch click. I tried to brush it off. Old buildings have quirks, right? Maybe the air pressure shifted. Maybe the hinges were loose. But I felt unsettled enough that I stacked one of my dining chairs against the door before sleeping again. That chair was on the other side of the room when I woke up. I just froze when I saw it. It wasn't tipped over like it had slipped. It was upright, neatly placed near my desk. I tried to convince myself I had done it half asleep, maybe dreaming, but the pit in my stomach wouldn't let it go. That morning, I barely focused in class, replaying the memory over and over. Over the next few days, little things started happening. My keys would be on the counter when I was sure I had left them by the door. My bathroom light was on when I came home one night, even though I always turned it off. Once, I swear I heard a faint humming, like a woman's voice coming from the kitchen. But when I stepped out, it stopped instantly. The breaking point came one Thursday night. I had just turned off my laptop and was about to go to bed when I heard the unmistakable sound of my front door unlocking. The metallic click of the deadbolts sliding open echoed through the apartment. I froze, heart pounding, listening. Then came the soft creak of the door opening. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, my desk lamp, and stood in my bedroom, waiting. My apartment was small. If anyone walked in, they'd be in sight within seconds. But no one came. After what felt like an eternity, I finally forced myself to check. The door was shut, locked, bolted from the inside. I barely slept that night, but when I did, I had the most vivid nightmare. In it, I was lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, when a woman with long black hair crawled out from under my mattress. Not climbed, crawled like she was slithering, her limbs bending at strange angles. She leaned over me, whispering in a low sing-song voice that I couldn't quite make out. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping. But the part that still makes my stomach turn is this. When I swung my legs off the bed, the carpet under me was damp, cold, damp, like someone had spilled water, except it smelled faintly metallic, like rust. I never figured out what was happening in that apartment. I moved out 2 weeks later, using every excuse I could to my landlord. But even now, in my new place, I keep my door locked tight at night. I sleep with the lights on sometimes too, because deep down, I can't shake the feeling that whatever was there, it wasn't just inside that old apartment. It had been under my bed. This happened 2 years ago, when I had just turned 24 and was living alone for the first time. I had moved into a modest apartment complex in the city after getting a job at a small marketing firm. It wasn't luxury living by any means, but it was clean, affordable, and in a neighborhood that felt safe enough for a young woman on her own. My parents were proud of me for finally being independent, and I was excited to settle into my routine. The complex itself wasn't huge. 4 floors, a narrow hallway on each, and about 8 units per floor. I lived on the 3rd floor, apartment 3B, with a nice view of the street. Most of the tenants were quiet professionals or families, and for the first couple of weeks, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. But then I met my neighbor. My neighbor across the hall was a tall man in his late 40s. The first time I saw him, he stood in the hallway, staring a little too long before mumbling a flat hi. I brushed it off. City neighbors are often awkward, but after that, he always seemed to be around. When I left for work, he'd be in the hallway. When I came home, he'd suddenly step out of his door. Sometimes, I could hear him moving around at odd hours, like dragging furniture across the floor at 3 a.m. At first, I told myself he was just lonely. But then, little things started happening. Packages I ordered never made it to my door, but I'd sometimes catch him standing near my welcome mat. One night, when I got back late, I noticed my doorknob was slightly loose, like someone had fiddled with it. My stomach dropped, but I convinced myself maybe maintenance had checked something. The moment I knew it wasn't my imagination came one night when I was lying in bed, scrolling my phone. Around 1 a.m., I heard the faint sound of metal scratching at my door. My heart froze. Someone was trying to unlock it. I sat up, barely breathing, and then saw the shadow of feet under the crack. I wanted to scream, but instead, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 as quietly as I could. While I was whispering to the operator, the sound stopped. Then came the slow, heavy knock, followed by his voice. "Hey, I know you're awake. Why don't you open up?" Just for a second, I felt sick. He kept whispering, saying things I couldn't make out, pressing his ear against the door. But those minutes stretched into an eternity. He didn't leave. Instead, he crouched down, the shadow of his head moving lower, and I realized he was trying to look through the tiny space at the bottom of the door. I could hear his breathing, shallow, uneven, almost excited. At one point, he jiggled the handle again, harder this time, making the lock rattle so violently that I thought it might give. I backed away slowly, inching toward the kitchen, still whispering updates to the operator. My mind raced. What if he forced it open before the police got here? What if he had a weapon? I considered grabbing the knife from my counter, but my hands were shaking so badly, I was afraid I'd drop it and make a sound. Then the scratching returned, a sharper metallic sound, deliberate. He was trying another tool. My chest tightened. The operator's voice in my ear said calmly, "Stay with me, ma'am. Officers are very close. Just keep the line open." Suddenly, there was silence. For a moment, I thought he had given up, but then I heard it, his low laugh, a dry, raspy chuckle, like he was enjoying the panic he knew I was in. "You don't have to be scared," he whispered. "I just want to talk. Just open the door." Please, I bit down on my lip to stop from sobbing out loud. Every muscle in my body was stiff, my palms slick with sweat. I wanted to run, but where would I go? I was trapped. I stayed silent, heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. The operator told me to stay on the line, that officers were already on their way. After what felt like forever, I suddenly heard pounding footsteps in the stairwell, then a loud banging at his door. "Police, open up!" He scrambled, muttering something, then slammed his own door shut. I heard chaos, doors opening, neighbors waking up, officers shouting commands. Minutes later, they pulled him out of his apartment in handcuffs. The police told me he had burglary tools on him, and apparently there had been other reports from women in the building about strange encounters with him. He'd been lurking, watching, and probably waiting for the right time. That was the last night I ever stayed in that apartment. I packed up and moved out within a week. I still think about how close it came, how if I hadn't called, things could have ended very differently. To this day, I double-check every lock every night